What's up, everybody?
My name is Jeff.
And welcome to another episode of Something Amazing. It's a freezing cold Saturday morning, and yeah, winter is officially here. And on that note, are you guys enjoying the new Game of Thrones season?
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Anyway, in today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the HyperX RGB Ram and what kind of performance gains you can get out of it. Let's get into it. So not too long ago, actually towards the beginning of this year, we had changed the RAM in our system that I use every day from the ADATA XPG Spectrix D40 RAM, and we had changed over to the HyperX Predator RAM. Now, no matter what type of RAM sticks you use out there, the RAM modules themselves actually come from one of three companies. Namely Micron, SK Hynix, or Samsung. On your generation 1 Ryzen processors, most people used to say that you should be using Samsung B-die RAM modules, and that's what we had run on our system, which was the XPG ADATA XPG Spectrix D40 RAM modules, which were actually Samsung B-die RAM modules. However, with obviously as technology advanced and BIOS updates, etc., now on the Ryzen 2 processors, is that really the case? Do you need to use Samsung B-die sticks at this point in time? So the XPG RAM modules, they normally retail for around 1,600, 1,700 Rand. If you do get Micron RAM modules, those are even more expensive. Around, I think it was January, February, I had bought these HyperX Predator RGB RAM modules from EveTech, and they were going on special. I think I paid around 3,500 Rand for 32 gigs of RAM. Nowadays, you can pick them up. I saw it was on special about a week or two ago. You could get a 16 gig RAM module kit for 1,500. So for 32 gigs, you would pay 3,000 Rand. And basically, for the price of 16 gigs of RAM on the ADATA, you're getting 32 gigs of RAM on the HyperX.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Added to that, the ADATA XPG modules that we used to use were 3000 megahertz, and the HyperX RAM modules obviously run, the ones that we have, 3200 megahertz. It's always been said that the Ryzen processors usually react well to high speed RAM, so we thought we'd test it out and see what kind of results we would actually get.
Like to call.
Okay, Bixby. I hate it when Bixby comes on whenever she feels like it. So what we did was, obviously I use the ASUS Intelligent Dual Processor 5. It's basically an automated software that overclocks your processor. So the first step was I wanted to see what kind of results would we get. On the ADATA XPG running the ASUS software, we usually use encoding stability because I do a lot of rendering, a lot of editing on this PC. And what the software does is actually stress test the system at every point to make sure that your overclock is extremely stable and obviously within normal temperature ranges, etc. So with encoding stability, you're not going to get that golden 4 gigahertz overclock. That, if you want that, you would have to obviously manually overclock your system. So normally on the XPG running that software, we would get around 3.4 gigahertz. But when we change over to the HyperX Predator RAM, we were able to achieve an encoding stability overclock of 3.6 gigahertz on the Ryzen 2700. we also, for the stress testing, we distributed maximum as much as we could on the software, as the software would allow us, over the RAM as well. So obviously with the higher RAM speeds, we were able to achieve a much more stable, higher frequency in terms of our CPU, which was at 3.6 gigahertz. But the main thing is we want to compare apples with apples. Would the Hynix RAM now be more beneficial than the Samsung RAM? And so the first thing was, obviously we did a productivity test and we ran Cinebench. On Cinebench at 3.4 gigahertz on 16 gigabytes of RAM, on the XPG RAM modules we got a score of 1344, and on 16 gigs of RAM of the HyperX RAM modules we had got 1449. When we increased the overclock obviously to 3.6 gigahertz just for intersect, we had got a score of 1596 on Cinebench. So that already in itself told us that we were getting a much better performance out of our CPU. The RAM obviously aided it, and obviously the higher speed of the RAM had a beneficial effect on our system.
English, do you speak it? Yes.
For gaming, let me just say, most people would say you need only about 8 gigs or 16 gigs of RAM, but the more RAM you have, you really do see the benefit when you start using programs or software like After Effects or any editing software out there. The more RAM you have, I found, I didn't do a specific test for it, but I found that rendering and playback, especially in software like After Effects, was much more smoother, and the whole process was better, or the whole experience was better using more RAM. The next test that we did obviously was TimeSpy, which is a DirectX 12 benchmark, and we wanted to see in terms of gaming performance, etc., would the higher frequency RAM be more beneficial than the XPG or Samsung RAM. So the first test we did obviously was with the XPG 16 gigs of RAM at 3.4 gigahertz once again, and we got a CPU score on TimeSpy of 7636. When we ran the HyperX RAM, 16 gigs of RAM as well at the same frequency of 3.4 gigahertz, we got a CPU score of 7934. And then once again for intersect, once we ran the HyperX at 32 gigs at 3.6 gigahertz, we got a CPU score of 8450. So from these basic tests, obviously the days of always using Samsung B die on your system, I don't think it's applicable anymore, because we got obviously the cheaper Hynix RAM modules which are on the HyperX Predators, and we got much better results. However, we were comparing a 3000 megahertz RAM module versus a 3200 megahertz RAM module. Obviously price is important. For the price you're paying for the Samsung B die XPG, for 16 gigs you could get 32 gigs of 3200 megahertz HyperX Predator RAM modules. Just on a side note, the latency and the timings on both these RAM modules are identical, and we did not play around with any of the timings or try and overclock the RAM modules. The one downside of the HyperX was that they do say it has it's capable of your MSI Mystic lighting sync, and like if you got an ASUS motherboard like me, I've got the X470 Prime Pro, they do say it supports auto sync. However, it does not sync. So I actually reached out to both HyperX and ASUS, and the usual things was obviously, is your BIOS updated, is the Aura Sync software updated, blah blah blah. Did all whatever they asked me to do, but still the RAM modules wouldn't sync 100% with the rest of the components. I did compare it with the XPG. The XPG RAM modules obviously did show up in Aura Sync and synced up perfectly with the rest of the system, but it wasn't a deal breaker for me. It at certain points the flow pattern on the HyperX Predator RAM does sync up with the rest of the system, but it seems to flow a lot faster than what the other components are, and it doesn't show up in the Aura Sync. But I didn't think it looked too bad, so I decided to keep it. The one other benefit of the HyperX Predator RAM is that it's got a new RGB technology, which is your infrared sync technology. So something that you would notice with most RGB RAM out there, and it's something I saw on the XPG RAM modules when they were in the system. The one RAM module would always lag slightly behind the other. So there would always be dyssynchrony in your RGB flow pattern, especially if you got it on like a rainbow type of flow pattern. And the infrared sync actually syncs up all the RAM modules perfectly with one another. So just to demonstrate it, your first RAM module is your primary sync module, and it sends the infrared signal out to the other RAM module. So if you have to put something in between the first RAM module and the rest, blocking that signal, you would see that the colors would start lagging behind. And that's what you would usually see on most RAM modules out there. So I thought that was very cool that all the RAM modules are in sync with one another. Yeah, so on that note, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to be notified of new episodes. We apologize for not having episodes in the last 2 weeks. Work's been crazy. Also the flu took me out. I'm just starting to recover from it. But yeah, we'll be coming back with lots of new great episodes in the future. See you next time. Bye.